We all know the smiley face. It's basically the most harmless symbol on earth. It's have a good day, it's nostalgia, it's a doodle you can draw without thinking. But for years, there's been this theory, one that turns that symbol into something genuinely unsettling. Because across the U.S., young men would go out for a normal night, bars, friends, laughing, nothing dramatic, and then they would disappear. Days or weeks later, they'd be found dead in a river or lake. And almost every time, the official explanation was the same. He was intoxicated, got separated, took a wrong turn, fell into the water, accident. And on paper, that makes sense. Alcohol and water is a dangerous combination. But here's where it gets complicated. A small group of investigators and a lot of families looked at patterns and said, wait, something about this just doesn't feel random. And that's where the smiley face murders theories come in. It's not as a confirmed fact, not as something the FBI accept, but as a theory that refuses to die because for the people who believe it, the details feel too consistent to ignore. So today, we're going to do this the right way. Not this is definitely a serial killer, and not everyone who believes this is crazy. We're going to lay out what started it, what the strongest cases are, why law enforcement rejects it, and why some families still don't buy the official story. Because whether you think it's a real network of killers or a modern-day urban legend built on tragedies that look similar, you'll see why this one has stuck in people's minds for decades. To understand how this theory started, you don't begin with giant maps and pins. You begin with one case, one family, and one detective who didn't like the easy answers. New York City, during the winter of 1997, there was a 21-year-old Fordham University student named Patrick McNeill. He goes out with friends on the Upper East Side, just a normal college night, drinks, laughs, nothing out of the ordinary. And he leaves the bar around midnight, and then he's just gone. His family is frantic, flyers are everywhere, calls, retracing steps, and nothing. Then, almost 2 months later, on April the 7th, Patrick's body is pulled from the East River, roughly 12 miles from where he was last seen. Now, the medical examiner rules it an accidental drowning. A sad story. City life. Drunk guy gets disoriented, falls in. But Patrick's parents and the NYPD detective Kevin Gannon couldn't make the story fit because the question was simple. Why would Patrick travel that far to a more remote area alone? And there was another thing that bothered Gannon, enough that he documented it. Near where Patrick was recovered, there was a crudely painted smiley face on a concrete structure. But now in New York, graffiti is everywhere. It could mean nothing, but it lodged in his mind. And later, when other cases started stacking up, that symbol came back. Because Patrick's case didn't stay a one-off, over the next several years, similar stories popped up in other places. Young men, night out, disappear, found in water. And one case became a major turning point in public attention. Chris Jenkins in Minneapolis. It's Halloween night, 2002. Chris is 21, an honor student, a lacrosse player. Again, he's the has a future type. He's out with friends, and at some point, he gets separated and vanishes. 4 months pass. Then, in January 2003, his body's found in the Mississippi River, still wearing his Halloween costume. Now, at first, police leaned towards accidental drowning, but Chris's parents refused to accept it, and they keep pushing. And years later, in a major reversal, Minneapolis police publicly reclassified his death as a homicide and apologized to that family. Now, to be clear, reclassification doesn't automatically prove a smiley face network. But for people who believe something darker is happening, this case becomes a huge, see, it's not always an accident moment. Then there's the cluster that gets brought up consistently in this theory. La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's a college town, and the bars are, well, they're close to the river, a place where tragic drownings can happen. But supporters of the theory point out how many young men were found in or near the water over the years. Local police have consistently maintained that those were accidents and tied to alcohol and the geography of the area. And they've also stated that they didn't find any relevant smiley face symbols connected to those cases. So even there, you already see the divide. Families, theorists see the pattern. Police see environment plus intoxication plus probability. And then we get into a more modern case people debate heavily, Dakota James in Pittsburgh. In January of 2017, he goes out with coworkers. Later, he's seen on camera walking, then he just disappears. 40 days later, his body is found in the river. Now, the medical examiner rules out accidental drowning, but former Detective Ken Gannon and others argue parts of the case are suspicious, and Dakota's family has fought that ruling. A forensic pathologist reviewing the material connected to the case did raise some concerns about whether it was truly an accident, which is one reason the case stays in the conversation. So when people talk about the smiley face murders, they usually are pointing to this kind of repeating structure. Young men, often college age, not out drinking, separation from friends, disappearance, body found in water later, sometimes a smiley face graffiti tag found somewhere near the recovery area. And for believers, that last bullet point is the creepy signature. And for skeptics, it's the weakest part because smiley faces are one of the most common pieces of graffiti on Earth. Now, here's where we need to talk about the theory itself. The main public advocates have been retired detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Durrott, along with Dr. Lee Gilbertson. He's a criminal justice professor and often mentioned in the coverage of the theory. And what they argue is not one serial killer. They argue something bigger, multiple offenders, possibly coordinated with similar behavior across different cities. They suggest victims are not just drunk, some may have been drugged. They argue bodies are sometimes too well preserved with a stated timeline in the water. And they believe some men were killed elsewhere and placed in the water later. And they interpret smiley face graffiti as intentional, something like a taunt or a marker. Now, that's the claim. And it's a claim that has stayed alive because it speaks to something real. It's incredibly hard for families to accept accident when the person they lost was careful, responsible, and, seemed fine earlier, especially when the death scenes is murky and the timeline doesn't feel satisfying. But here's the other side, and it matters. In 2008, the FBI issued a public statement after reviewing the information provided by the retired detectives. Now, their conclusion was straightforward. They did not find evidence supporting links between the deaths and did not find evidence substantiating the serial killer theory. And beyond, the FBI researchers at the Center for Homicide Research published a research brief arguing the theory just doesn't hold up under scrutiny, especially the graffiti component, which they described as a common and easily found once you're actively looking for it. And that's the core of the skeptic argument. Drownings near nightlife districts and rivers are tragically common. Young men are statistically more likely to take risk while intoxicated. Cold water can slow decomposition and change how bodies appear. And there's no consistent forensic link across dozens of cases. Meaning, if this is a network operating for decades, why is there no clear physical evidence tying cases together? So what's the truth? The internet usually frames this as an all or nothing. Either it's a nationwide network of killers or it's just all drunk accidents and people are seeing patterns that aren't there. But honestly, the most realistic answer might be messy. It might be that many of these deaths are tragic accidents because alcohol plus water plus cold shock is genuinely deadly. And it might also be true that in some cases foul play happened. Not necessarily a single coordinated smiley face organization, but individual crimes that can hide inside a category of deaths that already looks accidental. Because if you were a killer and you wanted a death to look like an accident, then water is a terrifying, convenient cover story. And that's why this theory refuses to go away. Because even if the network part is wrong, the fear underneath it is relatable. How many times have you heard a story like this and thought, wait, how does someone just disappear and then end up in the river? It hits that part of your brain that wants the world to make sense, that wants a clear answer, a villain you can point to, instead of the truth being one bad decision plus darkness plus cold water plus minutes. So here's what I want to ask you. When you look at these cases, what do you see? Do you think there's enough there to believe a pattern of murder is being overlooked? Or do you think this is what happens when tragedy repeats, especially around nightlife districts near water and people connect dots that were never connected? Or do you think the truth is in the middle? So here's what I want to ask you. When you look at these cases, what do you see? Do you think there's enough there to believe a pattern of murder is being overlooked? Or do you think this is what happens when tragedy repeats, especially around nightlife districts near water and people? Connect the dots that were never connected? Or do you think the truth is in the middle? That most are accidents, but some are hidden homicides that just never got attention they deserved. Tell me what you think in the comments because this is one of those stories where your instincts matter and where people can look at the same facts and walk away with a totally different conclusion. Now, if you want more of these deep dives into conversational cases like this, where the official story and the public suspicion don't match, make sure that you are subscribed. And thanks for being here. This is The Dark Room. I'll see you next time. We've got some great stories for you. Be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend.